Basically, we were three co-founders at the time when we started the hub. So that was the name back in 2013. So it was myself, Vlad here, and Alexandra, and we had very diverse professional backgrounds. Myself at that time, just before we started the hub, I was working in a bank. I was an interbank trader. Alexandra was working in a leadership development and training company, and Vlad in a marketing company, but he can tell more himself. Yeah, so we had just very different backgrounds, but very complementary, we found out immediately.
So the funny thing is that we actually didn't start with the hub.
That's right.
We start with a different organization, which was called Ropot in Romanian. And the name came from the idea that Romania can do it, so România poate. That was the background of the name, and it's correct. The three of us, we all came from a corporate environment. Actually, myself, not necessarily really a corporate. I used to work in a corporation. I used to work for a brewing company, one of the largest producers in Romania. And the last years before starting my own journey as an entrepreneur, I was working as a business developer for a sport marketing agency. So that's the last job that I had, working for somebody else.
But there is a common denominator between the three of us. We all three of us, used to be part of a student organization. I mean, just talking about where did it start from? I think there's a bit of an essence coming from that.
That's actually not the way it happened. Because the way we started working for a personal, let's say, project, initially it was not necessarily a business. It was not necessarily designed to be a business. Our intention was to create a community of professionals. Basically, we had a lot of friends working in the business environment. With the ambition of supporting NGOs, social businesses actually, around NGOs, to develop in Romania. In those years, so that was about 13 years ago, social business was a new concept in the market in Romania, but also everywhere else. So we had a lot of NGOs, and we had a lot of friends that were operating NGOs, and they were struggling with financing their own operations. We were because we are talking about 2-3 years after the economic crisis from 2008. So everybody was actually suffering to some extent from this. So we said, okay, how about we help them in designing sustainable businesses around their social purpose driven organization. So this is how we started. We started by gathering all sorts of friends, all sorts of people. We created events. We started running events in cafes, everywhere we could, and everywhere we were allowed to make an event. I still remember that we had to change the cafes after every event. Because when we were going to discuss about making a reservation, we were saying we're going to be 20 people at max, so everything is going to be fine. But we had 50 people showing up for such an event, and it was a complete chaos because they were not prepared to handle such a large group. And of course, we had issues with payments and all sorts of small details, logistical details.
Pre-Revolut times.
Yeah, pre-Revolut times. So every event was in a different location, a new location. And in the end, we decided that if we are to build a community, because by all the feedback that we were getting from the market and from the friends and people around us, there was a demand of such a community. And we said, okay, we need a space. So basically, this is how we starting thinking that a community also needs a physical space where people, like-minded people, get together and work and collaborate and design ideas and work for the future. So actually, this is the pre-concept of the co-working space that initially was named the Hub.
So we were at this point of like, we figured that we want to build a community, right? And we figured that the community also needs a house, a place where you can actually host the community. So therefore the idea of like opening a co-working, being the first one, it also meant like you had no benchmarks, right? Like right now it's easy. People know when you say co-work, they know what to imagine, they know what to envision. Even for us to understand what it means, we actually saw it outside of Romania, right? So we had some friends coming from university times, same organization, Isaac, that were actually working on opening the hub in Vienna at that time. So it was from them that we found out about the concept for the very first time, understanding also a bit the logistics and everything. And then it went very according to our skills, but also passions. So Vlad ended up being the one that not only that he ended up doing the marketing because he knew that, but he was the only one that he was like the major one out of the three of us that understood the business model behind the co-working, right? Alexandra was very much into the hosting and art of hosting and all these things, while myself, I ended up being the finance initially, right? Because like somebody needed to also be in charge with this part. So this is how we found out about it. We prototyped it. That's, I mean, talking about entrepreneurs and like doing what you're preaching is like we prototyped the idea, and for 1 year or a bit over a year, it was called Hub X. It's like Hub YX, and it came from Hub Young Experiment. It was like this very small 50 square meters space in the old center downtown, where we prototype what it means to be actually hosting, you know, people that are going to come and use your space, and figuring out what do they expect, right? Like in terms of furniture, in terms of internet. Oh, there's not enough to have just one network, because every now and then, guess what? It's gonna fail. So that's how we learned that you need to have a backup and so on and so forth. So we prototyped the thing for a year before we actually decided to go for the, you know, full-blown version of a co-working. Initially 300 square meters. It was not just about ourselves getting convinced. It was also about convincing the bank, because this is how we financed it. We went for a loan. And yeah, and then it's like it moved very fast. We opened in June, and it took us just 2 months to realize that just 300 square meters, it's not working out. There was one element that was working way better. So the demand was much higher than what we expected and what we put in our business plan and in the, you know, operational plan of how the space was being used, and that was the conference center part. So the fact that people had finally a place that looked very different from the hotel rooms. It was still at the time where in Bucharest, most of the companies, big or small, new or old, everybody was organizing their fancy events in hotels. And suddenly we were like an alternative place, still centrally located, so on and so forth. And that's why very quickly Vlad proposed, and we went for like doubling the space. So we went from 300 to 600 by the end of summer. And I'll let you continue so that we build the story further. So what happened after the hub was launched in its full-blown version? Halelor numărul 5.
Uniris.
Yeah.
Uniris Square. There is another co-working space there now.
Commons.
We left that location in 2017.
Once we outgrew it.
Yeah, we we chose a different location in Tineretului because we were needing much more space. Yeah, but the initial stages are always fun because it's a lot of excitement and everybody's excited. We're talking about a time where we had a lot of friends and we knew a lot of people that were actually starting their own entrepreneurial journey during those years. It's because of the economic crisis that happened a few years earlier. A lot of, I would say, teenagers, because we were way younger than we are today, obviously, and excited and enthusiastic and with a lot of, let's say, energy to invest in personal adventures. So it was quite a busy and buzzworthy environment if we're to talk about entrepreneurship. However, nobody knew what they were doing. Okay, so there was a lot of excitement, a lot of energy, a lot of working hours for everybody. However, the business results were actually not as expected because we were lacking a lot of, we as team, but not just us. I would say the ecosystem at large. We were lacking the knowledge to do business because we were looking to see, and we were looking for support. But at that time, mentors, there were none, or maybe just a few in the market. If we talk about investors, none. So the bank or personal money were basically the two options that you as an entrepreneur were having to finance your startup. So it was pretty heroic in a sense. But it was fun. Soon we also learned a lot about financing, a lot about the cost structure, and a lot about sales and clients and customer service and all sorts of elements that we actually built along the time. So yeah, we were. I would say that those were years that our annual revenue was almost doubling every year. Of course, when you start small, it's not that complicated to have like an increase of almost 100% year on year. We lost that kind of growth in the coming years, but also with higher revenues, also we had higher challenges. You need a bigger team, you need to have a lot of processes, procedure in place. Of course, you have new clients. This is why we decided that if we said, okay, we understand the business model very well. So we know how to build a co-working space. We were actually the only ones in the market at the time. There were some other, let's say, tryouts in the market we knew about, but they were not as successful as ours in terms of both business, community, and the vibe. So we said, okay, let's go for Cluj. So we made this step in 2015. We went to Cluj and we say, okay, Cluj is really booming. This is really a cool environment where to scale our operations. It took us 1 year to put in place all the elements. Again, the financing for the second space in Cluj was through a bank loan as well. And we opened March 2016. It was a very nice opening with a lot of nice people around, from the mayor. We had the US ambassador come in Romania at the time, joining our launching events. It was really, really nice. Huge space. It was, in 2016, the space in Cluj was double the size of the one in Bucharest. because we said, okay, it's gonna be really nice. We put a lot of energy into that space. The design was really beautiful.
Alice in Wonderland.
Alice in Wonderland was the
Was the
theme of the
concept.
space. Still, to this date, I personally, it's my favorite space that I planned. Complete failure. Yeah, complete failure. We had to close the space end of 2017, so 1.5, almost 2 years, let's say, of operating the space. Because one of the things that we didn't understand is that when you scale, you need to make sure that you're ready to scale, especially when scaling means that you go and operate your business in a completely different environment. And while we speak the same language, culturally it stood completely different places, Bucharest and Cluj-Napoca. And for that, we were not ready. We didn't prepare enough for this. So we had a lot of issues. We had a lot of misperceptions on the realities of the market in Cluj. So while the space was actually really nice and we had people, the community was growing every month, it was not enough. From a price perspective, especially the conference center didn't work there, so we had to close. However, that was one of the toughest lessons and very expensive one that we had in those years.
I think we were, as we put it at the end, it's like we were too soon in the market, in the ecosystem.
Too big.
And too big, in the sense of like we went for a too big space, assuming somehow the same rhythm and the same adoption as in Bucharest, which was not the case. Already at that time, everybody was like saying Cluj, the next Silicon Valley of Romania, this innovation, buzzing hub, so on and so forth. But like for our type of client, that was not necessarily true, because it was a lot of IT companies, indeed. But a lot of IT companies is like what we all, like right now, we all know that basically that means a lot of outsourcing, right? But like nobody was saying that initially, or like just like IT companies in Cluj. But it took us, we were already there, realizing that the outsourcing type of companies that were there, basically they were not entrepreneurs. So they were not clients, right? They were not becoming clients to the Impact Hub. They were at most renting space. Renting space was another like second kind of like assumption, wrong assumption that we had compared to Bucharest. We had the expectation that people are going to be as, excited and happy to bring their, like all their corporate and all their, even small business events in the hub, which was not the case, because it was still very much in the mentality that if you need to prove something to the market, you need to host your event in a hotel. So it's in that sense that we're a bit too early, right? To that it applies that we were a bit too early. On the other hand, it allowed us to prototype some things that we didn't have in Bucharest. So we did prototype in Cluj things that we afterwards brought back to the model in Bucharest. So the first team offices, for example, we didn't have them in Bucharest because here we still operated 600 square meters. So it had literally no space where to, design team offices. Going there to the big space, Vlad had the chance to, incorporate that, see that it works. So once we moved to the big location in Timpurna in Bucharest, guess what? We finally had team offices. So yeah, it came with, it was a very different reality. We didn't expect it to be so different, though it's in the same country, you would say, come on. The Impact Hub and our way of building this business, building this coworking, it came with a lot of us, right? So it came with a lot of soul and a lot of involvement and a lot of our, personal relationships and networks. And when I'm saying, us, it's not just the two of us, right? It's the two of us plus some other people that were this, constant initial community, right? The inner community. like the initial team, the co-founders, the friends of friends that we started with. So that was tough to replicate, I think, for a lot of other people in the market. And that's why it was also a challenge for us in Cluj, right? Because we didn't move to Cluj, like we were not starting to build and develop relationships. I think this is part of the business model to a certain extent for us. It's all the time been the Impact Hub is a relationship first type of business.
Mm-hmm. And that's what still sets us apart from other competitors in the market. We don't look at our businesses, or we don't look at the co-working side of our business as a real estate business. It's much more a community based business. Though what's true is that when you scale and when you expand, if you have a higher number of clients, the community becomes a tougher environment to keep and to hold, because we have way more people. It's like with friends, when you host a party and it's you and your best 10 friends, and you all know each other and you know your habits, and there are a lot of things that you don't need to discuss about. Yeah, it's the rules of the house. They naturally are in the flow. If you host the party and you invite 30 new other people, though you have some rules, it takes a while for people to get acquainted with each other, to get accustomed to the rules, and it's a tricky environment for a while. Then probably it will be like with the first 10 people, but the larger
that's what you hope, right?
Yeah,
like
the larger the crowd, the larger the community, the more complex the community and hosting process becomes.
It was definitely about the community. I still remember. It was two things. We were talking a lot about community at a time where the term was not used again, right? It was like not used. I literally remember that. And I remember the first, slide sets at events and stuff like that. And the other one was like, you were building a hub. You were building a hub, and then suddenly it became the term in itself, right? It became so used by everyone, but like that was the generic somehow way of addressing this. I still remember, one of our MPs using the you're like hub. How was he saying? Ați hubizat tot. You're using hub for everything. Like suddenly, even in the public policies, if you're like paying attention at some point, they started using hub for whatever. Getting back, it was about building a community. Join our community was pretty much it.
And we pretty much knew most of the people working in the hub initially.
Like we knew them personally.
Yeah, we knew them personally. They were friends of ours or friends of our friends, it was quite a movement. I think it was the first concept like this in Bucharest at the time. So it was really natural for people to join in. And it set a really cool and nice environment and vibe to come to the office. Yeah? So it was really cool to join the office. I still remember that we were discussing about, we had some huge conversations initially, how we keep track of time, because the business models around the co-working environment, it's around the time people are spending in the office. So this is what they are paying for. And we designed our first products based on this concept. So the big question was, how do we keep track of time for the people that are working in our space? So the easiest way to do it at that time was to use cards, access cards, like you have in bigger companies or in corporations, and you access by the card. So we know when you come in and we know when you leave the office. But once we realized that, we said, there's no way we're gonna do this. These people left big companies or corporations or more established companies to start their own personal businesses or small businesses or future large businesses, but with the intention of having a more innovative environment. So there's no way we're gonna do this. So we skipped that completely. I think we introduced access cards in 2017 because of the policies of the access policy of the building, not because we wanted necessarily to have those. And they were just for the front entrance. We were never checking anyway the hours or we had no strict policies around it. Because if we are to build a community, you need to trust the people being part of the community. So this was one of our most important values that we still keep using when we talk about our community of people working in our spaces. If you trust them, they will trust you. So it's a two-way street process. And it was really funny because it worked. Especially if we are to think that we are living in an environment where trust in our society is really low. Nobody trusts anything but trust. We don't trust the system, we don't trust the laws, we don't trust even our friends, we just trust them sometimes. So how do you build trust in an environment which lives or it develops in the same larger environment in society? It's with these small steps that we took. And we realized that over the time, it's really funny. We have people, clients, they keep track of their own time. And they come to our colleagues and to our team or to us and say, I do believe that I'm actually using more, I'm spending more time in using your services than I'm paying for, and I would like to upgrade my membership or downgrade. It goes both ways. And we actually made some surveys over the years, informal ones, where we try to understand the patterns and the behavior of our community, and we realized that the average is really there. It's actually lower than what they are paying for. Even though you might have individuals that are like exceptions, but the average, it's lower. And that's really about trust. Mm-hmm. We are an open environment. We never had the case of somebody stealing stuff from one another. So it's really about setting still amazing. It's really, I won't say names, but last year we had an incident actually, where one of our members opened its locker and discovered a bag with cash, a huge amount of money, huge, really huge. She took the money and came to me and said, look, I found this is not mine. I will keep it. We need to track whose money it is. And the money got back to the right person. So yeah, it's about trust. It's about maintaining a certain relationship.
I would say easy and difficult at the same time. So it's like whenever you set your mind to do something, right, you just need to trust that you need to find those crazy people same as you to, even fund it. Some of them, they are going to join you and become your partner. Some of them will be your first client, but you also need to trust that you need to find that kind of, funder, investor that is going to get what you're trying to build. It worked easy in our case in the sense of the timing, I would say, because we did manage to find this one bank that saw that also, like building social businesses sounds good, cool and good, and it's, a thing of the future, so why not? It was, in that sense, it was easy, right? The tough part is that you still need to convince the risk person from any bank, right? And it doesn't matter that the bank, is visionary. It's, up to you if you're going to cut it, but I'm also happy to share the name of the bank even today. I mean, it's like BCR was like the first bank to do, social financing, social banking. But it was still tough because you needed to convince, right? The people from the bank, they still needed to follow, their processes, their templates. You get to the question of like, oh, great, so you're a coworking, whatever that means, right? Because you're the first one, like they're trying to grasp your business model. But I think you have a mistake here in the Excels. I mean, you cannot tell me that you're going to sell 500 subscriptions per month because in the plan I can see just 70 seats. I'm like, yeah, there's no mistake. What do you mean? Like 70 does not equal 500. I'm like, there's this concept with the time. It's like, yeah, but then like I need the multiplier. I'm like, it's not just a simple multiplier. It's like some seats are going to be occupied by the same person throughout the day. Some others will be used by 2 or 3 people. It depends. It also varies by day, it varies by season. It's a bit... So yeah, in that sense, it's difficult, right? Like any business has its like nitty-gritty parts, but you need to trust yourself that and like, go back, continue going back to the funder, I would say. Again, I don't think it matters if it's a bank or a VC nowadays. And just keep on explaining and keep on also seeing what are their questions, what are the things that they don't understand, what are the things that you maybe misexplained, right, initially.
But I would actually like to complement a bit this conversation, because it was really tough to talk and to deal with banks in those years. It's because it's challenging. It's challenging for a bank which has a zero risk policy. Usually, they're risk adverse by default, and that's the way they work, they operate. It's really difficult for the people in the system to understand the notion, the concept of a startup, and how high the risk for failure is with startups, generally speaking. Now, if we're to talk about how the banking system also grew and evolved over the years, and we see this because we continue to partner with banks in financing our projects. The landscape is completely different nowadays, and it's not uncommon or not difficult to understand why banks are much more a financier than private investments, or even business angels investments, because they learn how to deal with startups. They learned how to understand the business models. They learned that they need separate people and different teams to analyze. Sorry. They need different teams and different people to analyze the business. It's not like you go in a certain branch and you take a credit for your startup. There is a dedicated team, a dedicated department that does the analyze for you, which is great. I think it's really great.
Yeah, I think events, we've done them from the very first year, right? I mean, we had an entire portfolio of events, right? From like the very socializing, networking, driven events, to the more, knowledge and bringing inspiration and inviting, guest speakers and bringing real like know-how to the community. So that in that sense, we've had events from the very first year. programs, I think it took us a bit, like, I think we started like the first pre-accelerator program must have been back in 2014. 13, already in the first year. Okay, second, but that's what I'm saying. Okay, sorry, 2013. So that's when we had, it was called the 60 Days Challenge. Yeah, and it was based on let's say model, methodology coming from this like business modeling collaboration with the Impact Hub, also in some other countries. So that was the very first program, and we had people from the community, right, that joined.
Yeah.
It
was with the business model generation. We love that methodology. There is a book that was actually part of our initial design of how we work with startups. It's called Business Model Generation, and it's coming from a company named Business Model Inc. And we had invited to one of our conferences the founder and the CEO from that company. So this is how we got in touch, and we started to learn more about how they work with corporates around innovation. So we applied similar principles and similar templates and methodologies in working with startups. So yeah, this is how.
And NGOs, because we all the time wanted to test how the NGOs are also reacting to, like, teaching them, how to improve their operating business models.
Well, historically, there are two ways in which we were able to design and implement support programs for entrepreneurs or social entrepreneurs. One option was through European grants, European Union funding, but initially the money was coming just through national agencies, so through Romanian authorities. So that was one option. The other option was corporate or private funding or philanthropic money. The problem in those early years was that we were really reluctant in working with Romanian public institutions because we had learned and we knew stories about challenges in actually funding the programs that were supposed to be funded, and major issues with the timing of payments and all sorts of administrative issues. And we were actually really scared about the prospect that if we are to take such an opportunity, it might actually affect our business operations dramatically to a point where we don't have the money to pay the bills, because the process was that you were making the payments and the authority was actually reimbursing your payments. So we were really reluctant, and we said, no, we're not going to do this. We understand the benefits, we understand the opportunity, but the risk is way too high for us as a small company with not a large cash in the bank, cash amount in the bank, so we're not going to do it. On the other hand, in the private environment, the level of interest in supporting startups was really, really low in those years. Because again, startup ecosystem and innovations and technology, all the things that we see now in the market, they were really scarce. Really, it was 1 in a million probably. So nobody was excited about this, especially if you also consider the fact that for large companies in Romania, most of them are international, so multinational companies, and the decision process for such investments to invest in startups is not made here. It's usually made in the headquarters. So the internal process takes a lot of time. So really challenging. But over the years, the landscape changed because on one hand, companies understood that startups are not necessarily misaligned or not aligned with their business. And there is a growing perception worldwide that large companies are actually looking for startups because they now understand that the startups can actually innovate way faster, cheaper, and with a higher output than if you take the same project and implement it internally with a, let's say, innovation department or research and development department. It's just because of the processes and procedures put in place. So the landscape, the environment became way more interesting. So we see more and more companies investing in startups on all sorts of industries or verticals. We call them verticals instead of industries because we also realize that if you talk about an industry, if you talk about climate, let's say, green startups, you cannot talk about one industry. It's multiple industries. So this is why we call them verticals. It's like topic verticals. Agri-tech, agri-food, climate, social. These are the topics that we are most interested in. And this is where we put a lot of effort in supporting startups. And also I would say that one of the things that grew over the time was the trust element. As we discussed earlier about trust in terms of community, it's the similar concept in trust in relationship with partnerships or financing partners. It's because one company sees that, the team from Impact Hub is doing an amazing job with that project. We have similar intentions. How about we partner with them because we heard about them. So again, all our business is a relationship business model. If we're to talk about coworking or if we're to talk about incubators or accelerators or funding or whatever. So, yeah.
I'll add something a bit to it. I mean, I think it's like, as Vlad said, on one hand, it took us, not only us, but like a lot of the real players in the ecosystem, it took us a bit more time to understand also how to operate with the public funding available. And we are still there, if you ask me, but like, I think it's getting better. But it's also interesting about the involvement on behalf of the corporates, right? And the foundations and to me, it's still amazing that we managed. I mean, if you would have asked me, I would have said, I don't know how long it's gonna take, but it's still amazing that we are running this program, right? We are running Startarium, that is an educational, right, entrepreneurial educational platform funded by a bank, and we are entering, I think, the 8th year, right? So it's like multi-year funding. It's something very rare in the Romanian market. And it's not just about ourselves. It's like, just look at any program on the market. This is one of the problems of the ecosystem, because you have just like, it works for 2 or 3 or 4 years, but then for some reason it gets cut off, right? So that's not helping in a way, right? To grow more products in these like accelerators, incubators, which we don't really have, to be honest. But yeah, I think it's an important thing, like the trust between, like the funder and the implementer, who's the one that is gonna enable this like scouting and mentoring and really development of innovators, of new startups, especially because by now there is a lot of like interest, right, in the market. We are in a very different position. So yeah, I would think it's interesting to analyze a bit the multi-year funding. We're not necessarily interested to help NGOs more. We were interested in like helping both businesses and NGOs, right? We had this mentality of like NGOs are also businesses, right? Like they hire people, they are supposed to deliver a service, they should care about the customer experience. So we just didn't want them to be treated differently. That's all. We cared about the social part, right? Which nowadays it doesn't matter if it's an NGO or a tech startup. It can very well have, it's what we call impact, right? It's like, what's the impact of your organization? Nowadays, again, if it's a green startup versus an NGO, it's hard to say who has a bigger, higher mission. So it's not about that necessarily. It's not about the legal form. That's what I mean. I think, in my case, I don't think I've heard necessarily of startups before we embarked on this journey, I must say, or I don't remember, right? Or anyway, it was not like popular. Not even media was writing about it. What are we talking, right? As before 2010. So it must have been in this world of the Impact Hub and the impact, like talking, I guess, with the other Impact Hubs as well. Just because of the fact, and that helped us a lot. Having Impact Hubs in other countries, different environments, different markets, sometimes you are hearing about stuff and concepts 2 to 3 to 4 years ahead of what's coming and happening in Romania. It was true about climate, we must say. Right now climate is also, sustainability rather. It's what's, everybody talks about in Romania, but in the Impact Hub world, we've found out about it 5 or 6 years ago. All the Western European impact hubs were gearing all their programs towards this. For us, for a long time, the debate was rather if the startups needs to be, should we focus solely on creating startups that create technology, right? And it was not just something that we focused on. I think it was something that even the entire ecosystem was like grinding and trying to understand how to look at it. Right now, it's like, okay, when we say startups, for us, it's inherently, it has the technology piece, but for us, it has never been about technology as an means, as an end. It's rather a means to an end. Right, so it's like it's through technology that you're going to come up with innovations for children. So we had this beautiful program designed for a very niche target audience. But it's, again, most of them are using technology, right? Initially, it doesn't say anywhere per se. We never focused on communicating technology first. It's like through technology that you need to come up with solutions to solve this and this type of problems. And that's how we evolved, our thinking evolved, I would say, around startups.
And I think startup is a concept that defines basically a new company. But the concept of startup, it's very much related to the funding stage or the funding options. And if we consider the fact that in the early days of our story, funding was lacking completely, the concept of startup was not necessarily needed as well. So the concept actually came later, in a later stage in the ecosystem and in the environment, because of the way new companies are funded, okay? They are in startup stage. So this is how you define the concept, I would say.
It was massive. I think we just didn't realize how massive it's gonna be. And I think it went the same for anyone managing a business, big or small, Romania or globally. But because of our business model, indeed, it was very, very difficult to, steer the ship and manage to downsize, because that's what we eventually had to do. While also, it went through different phases. Initially, it was very tough because all our energy and time, while being in lockdown, like the entire world, but all our energy and time was about how do you keep the community safe, and how do you do all kinds of things, from like,
How do you keep the team
and how do you keep the team, right, safe, sane, and all that.
hired?
Yeah, hired. How do
Let's
you
talk
pay?
about facts. How do you keep on paying your?
How do you keep on paying your bills? How do you, that was,
team.
for us, it was a massive test of the fact that we had a community. There were like two moments in our history, business history at least, where we really tested if we have a community. And that was definitely one of them. Because of the lockdown, obviously nobody was using the space, right? But that doesn't mean our payables were stopping. Not at all. On the contrary, they were not stopping. And you have a model where you're like paying massive rent. So it was really helpful to test and to see that we do have a community, because we did, yes, offer like some discounts, but very small in comparison to what they were paying, and they ended up paying, and everybody was like, just send us the invoice, we'll do our best to pay it. We just want to make sure that once this is over, we have the hub to get back to. We can't imagine you guys going under and us not paying our invoices, so we'll do our best. So with very few exceptions, so like businesses that really went, like they were massively affected according to their business model by the pandemic. In the rest, like all our community paid their dues, and they continue to do that. And like we kept changing and adapting. So that was like one very important aspect. The second reason I want to mention, so one is like the community helped tremendously. The second is definitely the team. So for the team, both the what we call the space-based team, and the programs-based team, for both parts of the team, it was massive to adapt. They brought the programs team had to bring the entire content, and like all the delivery had to be online. And they managed to do that brilliantly. Same for the space team that was managing at the beginning of the pandemic. We were managing 3 spaces, so we were operating in 3 different locations in Bucharest, and they had to constantly adapt to also the new regulations and the spacing. I don't even remember what's the word. We heard it for some years.
Distanțare socială.
Yes. And doing all the measures and taking out furniture and resending blueprints to all the clients and recontracting according to the new measures, and like recalculating the capacity and all that. So everybody was working a lot to adapt to the new reality, and also managed to still offered, this like very good experience to the clients, because that was part of what we were doing. Like the members, we never called them. We've rarely, we need to train ourselves to call them clients. We call them members. Even to the day, for us, our clients are our members of our community. That got chairs during the pandemic, so we made sure we rented the van, and Vlad and Tori were just delivering the amazing Herman Miller chairs from the Impact Hub to all the home offices across Bucharest, so that people had the best chair while they were working from home. What else helped us to navigate and survive?
We developed this principle that stated that it still applies. Change is the single constant in our life. And I think this sums up really well the way we navigated through the last years. Every day it's a new beginning. The fact that you're still sane at the end of the day, it means that you can actually wake up the next morning and start from the beginning. It sounds dramatic. It had its ups and downs. It was not necessarily all dramatic. I think this period of time brought both the best and the worst in all of us. And I'm not talking just about us as a team. We see changes all over the ecosystem and actually all over the society. We see how the behavior of our community has changed over the years, and it's actually still changing. Everybody's still adapting to a new way of operating. It's not the way of working. It's not settled. I get a lot of questions around this. How do you perceive the future of business model around co-working and shared offices? And I'm not sure yet. I mean, I see patterns, I see different trends, I see them all with us, I see them outside, I see them with others, but they are still adapting, they are still changing. So change is continuing to be the constant and single constant in our life. We learned a lot. I think it was it is frustrating to see your business crumble and you have no control of it. There is nothing that you can actually control around it. There is nothing that you can do. You didn't do anything wrong. It's just the way it is. It's the environment. There's nobody to blame. It's frustrating. However, there are a lot of things that we learned over the last years. And I think I still remember that it was, I think, in the summer or sometime late summer 2020 when we had this conversation around a team lunch, and we realized that the fact that we had the failure in Cluj actually helped us a bit in dealing with this crisis. I remember that when we discussed about closing the business in Cluj, it took us, I think, around 6 months of trying to figure out a way that will not end
the entire operation.
The operation.
Yeah,
we tried everything. However, all the scenarios were actually going the same direction. It was not okay. But it took us emotionally, and with all the struggles that we put in place, it took us about 6 months to take the decision, okay, the best choice is to actually close the doors of this operation. In the pandemic years, the decision of closing parts of our business or different elements that were actually really struggling was way faster. It was a constant conversation with our partners, both our investors or our partners in terms, especially when we have to talk about co-working landlords. They are, in a sense, they are our partners because they represent quite a large amount of our business model. So we are in constant conversations. We were in constant talks with them. So with every and each of them, there was a clear thread. We can do this. If this is okay, we're gonna continue making step. If not, we will close the business with everything that follows. Because the decision process was done faster, and I think it helped us to bleed less than probably would have with lack of prior experiences. However, even though we learned a lot. We learned a lot about mitigating risks, about preparing yourself for such situation, the decision process that needs to be put in place. What are priorities when you deal with crisis? Who comes first? Who goes first? It's difficult. It's not easy. But all in all, I think we came out better entrepreneurs, a bit more pragmatic than we used to be. So we learn by practice. Not necessarily cheap, but it's a way of doing things.
I'll start from the fact that, I mean, something very funny happened to me this spring. I went on a 1-week tour in Israel, And it's something that I've done before. So it was my second tour in Israel. The previous and the first one was 7 years ago. And it just, gave me the opportunity to reflect back of like, what were my reactions? How was I, looking with the big eyes 7 years ago, like everything that is happening in Israel, the startup nation, versus now, right? So it really put me in this like reflection mode in realizing, oh my God, we are really, it, right? That we've come a long way, but like, I realized that we've really grown so much as an ecosystem, right? Like 7 years ago, or like, again, your documentary, your movie is going to put a bit of light and also like the right flow of things, right? But like 10 years ago, you definitely didn't have the VCs. Not having the VCs, it's like Vlad was saying, you didn't have a certain type of funding. You didn't have a certain type of startups in the market. Yeah, you had some startups, but not funded the way that the VCs are funding you, and not giving you the kind of support, because it's not only about the money; it's the entire support system that comes with that. That's one. Second is like definitely the number of coworkings, but also like accelerators, so on and so forth. We kept growing, and we kept growing in the sense of like not only the number, but also the geographical areas which I think is very important, right? Because like it's not like innovation happens just in Bucharest or it happens just in Cluj, right? So you need to go and give access to the people from other cities. So it's in that sense that I think that the ecosystem has grown a lot. I think unfortunately it also stopped, or like not stopped, but like there was a break because of the pandemic, in all honesty, in terms of like events and like all this effervescence in the ecosystem. And just remembering even you have like the How to Web and the Startarium Pitch Days and all these like big events. They are important in a sense, right? Because they are bringing a lot of inspiration. They are building momentum. They are giving you also the chance to connect, right? In terms of connecting really to each other, I think this is what I really miss, and why I hate the pandemic, caught us at this time where the ecosystem was really growing. Because yes, it works, and like everything happens in online and hybrid and so on, but it's not the same thing, right? It's, again, even at the heart of the ecosystem, I think it's still going to be people, and that means connections, and that means you need to see each other. And this is the one thing that I hope we'll manage to do fast, like get back to that level of meeting and seeing, and just daring to dream of the next big thing, because it's not, we need to be ambitious again. And I think we're just at the level of like, we are barely surviving, we are like still recouping in different ways from the pandemic, and I can't wait to have the feeling that the ecosystem is again, just like, let's go for the next big thing. I think we are lacking, definitely we are lacking energy right now. I don't think we have, that's what I'm saying. We don't have the same level of energy that we had prior to 2020. I think we lacked even, as a nascent ecosystem, I think we lacked a lot of know-how. I think we are improving on that. But nevertheless, we still need, right, to even more know-how. Again, we are improving, we are getting better at it. But it's something to be improved and looked at. We just need practice also. We need to also accept the fact that some of these, even jobs in the ecosystem, nobody has done them before. It's like we are experiencing what it means to be a GP in the first, the first VCs in Romania. It's like not a lot of people to talk to. What it means to, operate a co-working, so on and so forth. So it's like certain roles, we are just the first generation that is doing them. So I think we also just need to practice, continue doing them, but also openly talk and share in that sense. And we do lack funding, but not funding for the startups. Though yes, it is a special year and it's going to be a tough year. Let's be honest about it. But I think we also lack a certain kind of, like a different kind of funding, a funding that goes to what we would rather call the ecosystem enablers, right? So how do you grow the ecosystem? That shouldn't be, it needs to be intentional. Somebody needs to intentionally put funding into this, because otherwise each of us is like 95% of the time you're struggling, just operating what you're doing, and just maybe 5% of the time you're doing development stuff for the ecosystem, taking time to network, taking time to share. It was a very rich experience in a way, right? And I don't regret it. Again, I don't know if I would do it, if I could have done it for more. I mean, honestly, for now, the answer was no. I spent just 1 year in the public sector working as a counselor on innovation for the Ministry of Research, Innovation and Digitalization. It felt way more than 1 year, I must admit. But for now, it's like how much, this is how much I could take. And I went for it, right? I chose that. I accepted. I mean, I really wanted to see how it is, and if I can make really a difference, right, and contribute. I think the public sector can benefit, and it's not like the startups could be supported by the public sector. I think it's vice versa. I think the public sector could benefit way more from the startups and generally from the ecosystem. I think it's one of the things, like all the friends and people in the ecosystem could witness to that. I'm trying to encourage more of them to take a bit of time and talk to the public institutions, go to some of those boring events, and just give feedback, because they do, like, every now and then they are open, and they literally need support. They are like very different worlds that don't know how to communicate, and they have really very little understanding of what we are building in this amazing startups ecosystem. They are not exposed to it, right? While having some very important tools in their hands. They are the ones operating national strategies. They are the ones allocating funds on like 7-year programs that if you don't do properly, right, it's something that we should understand. Once you're doing strategy and it's for the next 7+ years, it's very hard to steer along the way. But on the other hand, there's all the time a way, if you communicate, if you build this kind of like bridges in between. So yes, I'm all for, we should try to help the public sector, both at national level, but also like some of the things or changes could be easier regionally, right? So instead of complaining what happens in a ministry, it's easier to just directly go and see how you could support whatever lack of understanding they have, first of all, on innovation, because right now everybody wants to fund sustainability. So you can start from that angle. Again, even the small city halls, they'll need support on understanding what are they doing for the sustainability and the digitalization and all these like fancy concepts that they don't really know how to grasp. I don't know. I mean, I rather have elements of what I hope, right? It's like my hopes and ambition for it. I truly hope that we will manage, because again, it sounds short, but it can be a lot. I do hope that by, the end of the next 10 years, we will have managed to have those kind of like nodes in the ecosystem. I don't know if it's people or organizations that are managing to, push forward, ask for more, be more ambitious. I don't know if it's about, Romania needs to have way more national strategies on how do we support innovation here and bring clarity on like what are the verticals or smart specializations or whatever, how you call them, right? What are those things in which we decide to have really build competitive advantages as a country and as an ecosystem. But also, I think it's also a bit about ambition when it comes to us within the region, right? And a lot of like, again, certain parts of the ecosystem are way more active already in that and way more aware of like where is Romania positions within CE. Some other parts, they are not aware of this kind of like fight and struggle. So I do hope that yes, in 10 years time, we are like better placed within the region. We are a bit more, again, ambitious nationally, in like setting our mind to really spend, because the amount of funding that is available in the country, it's crazy, I'm telling you. I mean, I'll again point back to my Israel experience, and they were like, oh, when you're looking at the like, don't mind the 500 million euro that we are spending on innovation. We know it's a lot. And I'm like, no, it's not. Compared to the billions that Romania has available on, research, innovation, supporting SMEs, startup creation and all that, it's like billions we are spending. But we don't do it in a way that is really sustainable, right? And in a way that really creates value for the society and the economy. Because at the end of the day, these are the two things that matter. And one last thing that I'll add, again, I don't know how and when, but I think they're like bits and pieces that are starting to point that way. And one day I hope it's going to make a change. It is about the diaspora, right? For me, it's like the diaspora could be this massive game changer for the ecosystem and the country in so many different ways. It's not about calling them back. It's not about, I don't believe in that. I think people are happy. My friends, I know for sure they're happy there. Like everybody build a life in the country and in the company and in the organization that they've decided to live their lives. But it's about how do you make use of your very smart and well-connected diaspora. How do you make use in understanding what are the things that they see and they know, right, that could help build you a better future for the country? Because in the kind of like jobs and positions they see the future in a way that could actually help us, build Romania's position in the innovation ecosystem globally. Right now is diversity, inclusion, by the way. This is the latest, which again in Romania and also in the European Union, it's crippling, right? It's like you start hearing more topics, more discussions around this topic. I think you need to do both, right? You need to understand and like watch out, kind of like observe what's happening in the other countries, in the business sector, in the like societal, not only. But you also need to focus on like what you choose to be the next big thing for you. Again, for me, Israel, for example, is this amazing outlier, right? That they just decided and they constantly just choose their path. I mean, if they are to compare, right, like what, compared to the region, no way. Compared to what's possible in the sense of like it's a small country, small population, again, no way. It's like you just build for the future, right? It's like you need to mind the current reality and the current capabilities and capacities, but you also just need to choose certain things in the future for which you are really building and gearing everything, right? The education, the funding, like all the elements you need so that in 10, 15 years to be in a different place as a country. I don't think it takes more than that. Except for the politics, and the elections and all that, but that's a very different conversation.